The village of Neanda rested in the heart of the valley, surrounded by golden fields and towering baobab trees. It was a place where the river ran clear, where children's laughter filled the air, and where life moved at the rhythm of the seasons. In this peaceful village lived Abeny, a girl with a heart as gentle as the morning breeze and a beauty that turned heads wherever she walked. But more than her beauty, it was her kindness that made her beloved. She helped the elderly carry their firewood, played with the village children, and was always the first to offer a comforting word to those in need. Abeny had grown up in a loving home, raised by a father who adored her and a mother who shielded her with warmth. But fate was cruel. Her father, once the protector of their home, fell ill one cold season and never recovered. His death left a void in their lives, and grief settled in their home like an unwelcome guest. Without him, Abeny and her mother, Neanda, became vulnerable, their once secure life crumbling like dry earth beneath the sun. It wasn't long before Jabari entered their lives. A man of wealth and influence, he came as a suitor for Neanda, promising her security and stability in exchange for marriage. The village elders encouraged the match. After all, a widow without protection could fall into hardship. But Jabari was not a man of kindness or love. He valued wealth above all things and viewed people as nothing more than tools to gain more of it. To the villagers, Jabari was a respected merchant, a man who provided jobs and brought prosperity. But in the quiet corners of their home, Abeny saw his true nature. He was cold, his eyes always filled with calculation. He rarely spoke to her unless it was to give orders or to remind her that she was nothing in his household. He tolerated her presence only because of her mother, but even that patience was thin. Abeny, however, did not cower. Though she felt trapped under Jabari's rule, she carried herself with quiet dignity. She refused to let his bitterness break her spirit, and in secret, she dreamed of a day when she could leave, build a life of her own, and escape the cold, watchful eyes of the man who despised her. Then came the whispers. At first, they were just rumors, passed between traders and travelers at the village market. A powerful chief from a distant kingdom was searching for a wife, and he was willing to offer immense wealth in return. Gold, cattle, and land, riches that could change a man's fate overnight. But the whispers carried darker warnings as well. The chief was known for his cruelty, his harsh rule, and the way his wives were never seen again once they entered his palace. Jabari listened. The night Abeny overheard him speaking with the village elders, her stomach twisted with unease. "The chief's messengers will be passing through soon," one elder said. "He is looking for a girl of great beauty." Jabari remained silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice as smooth as the blade of a knife, he said, "Abeny is beautiful." The room grew silent. Abeny, hidden in the shadows, pressed a hand over her mouth to keep from gasping. "She is not your daughter," another elder pointed out carefully. Jabari exhaled, his fingers tapping against the wooden table. "She is nothing to me," he said. "But she can bring me everything." Abeny's heart pounded. She turned and fled before she could hear more, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She had known Jabari disliked her. She had known he wished her gone. But to sell her? To trade her for gold like she was a piece of livestock? Terror gripped her. She had to escape. She had to find a way out before it was too late. But even as she made her plans, she did not know that fate had already set its course, and her stepfather was not a man to let gold slip through his fingers. The morning of Abeny's departure was painted in gold, the sun stretching lazily across the sky as if unaware of the dark treachery unfolding beneath its gaze. The village of Neanda stirred with its usual rhythm, children chased one another between the huts, traders prepared their goods, and the elders gathered beneath the ancient baobab to share their wisdom. But within Jabari's household, a different kind of preparation was taking place. Abeny stood before her mother, confusion knitting her brows. "Father's relatives," she repeated, her voice uncertain. Jabari, ever the master of deception, nodded smoothly. "Your father's brother has been searching for you. He wishes to see you, to offer his guidance now that you are of age." He placed a firm hand on her shoulder, the touch as false as his smile. "You should go. It will be good for you." Neanda, Abony's mother, hesitated. Though she had spent years at Jabari's side, she had never truly trusted him. Something in his voice made her uneasy. "Why now?" she asked. "Why did they not come for her sooner?" Jabari's lips curved into an easy grin, though his patience thinned. "They have only now heard of her. Would you deny Abony the chance to know her father's family?" His tone was laced with quiet warning. Abony wanted to believe it. A chance to connect with her father's family was something she had longed for. Perhaps, in their home, she could find a place where she truly belonged. Despite the strange weight in her chest, she agreed. That afternoon, a group of Jabari's men escorted her from the village. Nia watched her daughter go, unable to shake the feeling that she was losing her. The journey was long, winding through dense forests and rocky hills. The men leading her were silent, their faces unreadable. Abony tried to speak with them, but their replies were curt. The unease in her heart grew heavier with every step. As they reached a clearing near the river, the men suddenly stopped. The air around them felt too still, too thick with something unspoken. "What is it?" Abony asked. "Why are we stopping?" Before she could react, a deafening war cry split the air. From the trees emerged a band of warriors, men clad in dark cloth, their faces painted with markings of a distant kingdom. Abony gasped, stumbling backward as the men surrounded her. She turned to her escorts, expecting them to defend her. Instead, they stepped aside. Abony's stomach twisted. "No," she whispered. "No, this isn't." One of the warriors grabbed her wrist, yanking her forward. Panic surged through her veins. She struggled, kicking and twisting, but their grip was ironclad. "Let me go," she screamed. "Please." Then she saw him. Jabari. Standing just beyond the clearing, arms crossed, watching as she was dragged away. "Jabari!" Abony cried out, her voice breaking. "Help me!" Jabari did not move. He did not even flinch. Instead, he extended a hand toward the leader of the warriors, who dropped a heavy bag of gold into his palm. The clinking of coins echoed in Abony's ears, drowning out her own heartbeat. Realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. He had sold her. Abony thrashed harder, her sobs wild, her breath ragged. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "Jabari, please." But the man who had stolen her father's place only turned his back, his fingers tightening around his newfound wealth. The warrior shoved Abony forward, dragging her away as she kicked and screamed. She watched Jabari disappear into the distance, her world unraveling with every step. The man who was supposed to protect her had sealed her fate with nothing more than a handful of gold. The journey to the distant kingdom was long and grueling. Abony's wrists were bound, the rough ropes digging into her skin as she was dragged behind the warriors like an animal. The further they traveled, the more the familiar landscapes of Neanda disappeared, swallowed by towering trees and foreign lands. Each night, she lay beneath the cold stars, silent tears soaking the earth as she prayed for a miracle. But none came. When they finally arrived, Abony was led through the grand gates of a fortress unlike anything she had ever seen. The palace was built of stone, massive and imposing, perched upon a hill overlooking the kingdom. Drums beat a slow rhythm in the distance, and people gathered to watch as she was paraded through the streets like a trophy. At the heart of the palace, seated on a throne of carved ebony and gold, was the man she was meant to marry. Chief Olumide. He was a towering figure draped in royal garments, his eyes sharp and calculating. His fingers, adorned with heavy rings, tapped lazily against the armrest as he studied her. "She is pleasing enough," he muttered, his deep voice rumbling like a distant storm. Abony's stomach churned. Pleasing enough. That was all she was to him, a prize, an ornament to show his power. The wedding was swift, performed in the old ways of his people. No words of love were spoken, no warmth exchanged. By the time the ceremony ended, Abony felt like a stranger in her own body, trapped in a nightmare with no escape. Life in the palace was suffocating. Abony was given fine clothes, adorned with gold and jewels, but they felt heavier than chains. She was expected to sit silently beside the chief at feasts, to smile when guests praised his wisdom and strength. But behind the luxurious walls, she was a prisoner. The chief did not love her. He barely acknowledged her beyond his need to flaunt her beauty before his court. She learned quickly that he was feared, not loved. His rule was built on power, and those who crossed him disappeared without a trace. Servants flitted through the halls, never meeting her eyes. The guards stationed at every door ensured she never wandered far. But even in the darkest moments, Abeny refused to be broken. Then, she met Mama Jara. Mama Jara was an old servant who had worked in the palace for decades. Her back was slightly bent with age, her hands rough from years of labor, but her eyes held a quiet wisdom that intrigued Abeny. Unlike the others, Mama Jara did not avert her gaze when she spoke. "You are not the first girl brought here against her will," she said one evening as she helped Abeny with her hair. Abeny stiffened. "And what happened to the others?" Mama Jara's expression darkened. "Some learned to survive. Others faded." Abeny swallowed hard. She would not fade. Over time, Mama Jara became her only friend. She taught Abeny how to navigate the palace without drawing attention, how to listen without being noticed. She spoke in hushed whispers about the chief's enemies, the unrest growing in the outer villages, the quiet alliances forming against him. And then, one night, she revealed the most important secret of all. "There are tunnels beneath this palace," Mama Jara murmured, her voice barely above a breath. "Passages that only a few know exist." Abeny's heart pounded. Hope. For the first time since she had been taken, she saw a path forward. If she played her role carefully, if she gathered the right knowledge, if she was patient, she could escape. And when she did, she would not run alone. She would return for everything that was stolen from her. The storm raged through the night, thunder shaking the palace walls as rain poured from the heavens. It was the perfect cover. Abeny stood in the shadows of her chamber, her heart pounding as she listened for the footsteps of the night guards. The storm had thrown the palace into chaos, guards scrambling to secure the fortress, servants hurrying to protect the chief's treasures from the flooding halls. No one would notice one missing wife. Mama Jara pressed a bundle of supplies into her hands. "Move swiftly, child," she whispered. "And do not look back." Abeny nodded, swallowing her fear. If she hesitated now, she would never get another chance. Together, they slipped into the dark corridors, their bare feet silent against the stone. Mama Jara led her to a hidden panel behind the kitchens, prying it open with practiced ease. Beyond it lay the tunnels, damp, narrow passageways carved beneath the palace, once used by ancient rulers as escape routes during times of war. "The eastern path will take you beyond the walls," Mama Jara whispered, pressing Abeny's hands. "Once you see the river, follow it north." Abeny hesitated, tears burning in her eyes. "Come with me." Mama Jara smiled sadly. "My time is here. But your destiny lies beyond these walls." Abeny forced herself to nod. There was no time for sorrow. With one last glance at the woman who had saved her, she turned and disappeared into the darkness. The tunnels stretched for miles beneath the palace. The air was thick and heavy, carrying the distant sound of dripping water. Abeny moved cautiously, guided by a small torch she had stolen from the kitchens. After what felt like hours, she found the exit, a narrow opening hidden beneath the roots of an ancient tree. She climbed out into the storm, gasping as the cool night air hit her face. She was free. But freedom came with dangers. The wilderness stretched endlessly before her, dense forests, steep cliffs, and rivers swollen from the rains. She had no horse, no weapon, only her wits and the stolen provisions Mama Jara had given her. She moved quickly, staying close to the shadows, avoiding the main roads where bounty hunters might search for her. The chief would not let her go easily. For days, she traveled through unfamiliar lands. She slept beneath trees, drank from rivers, and scavenged for food where she could. Then, one night, she heard them. The sound of hooves pounding against the earth. Abony pressed herself against the trunk of a tree, her breath shallow as she watched the figures in the distance. 3 men on horseback, their torches cutting through the night. Bounty hunters. They were searching for her. She waited, motionless, until they passed, then ran. She didn't stop running until her lungs burned, until she could no longer hear the horses. She knew now that she could not afford a single mistake. Weeks passed. Abony grew weaker, her clothes torn, her body weary. But her spirit never wavered. Then, one evening, she saw it, the border of a neighboring kingdom. A land untouched by the chief's influence. She collapsed to her knees, tears mixing with the dirt on her face. She had done it. But her journey was far from over. She had escaped. Now, she would return home. And she would take everything that was stolen from her. The sun hung low over the village of Neanda, casting long golden rays over the land Abony once called home. She stood at the edge of the village, her fine robes concealed beneath a plain traveler's cloak. No one recognized her. Not the children playing near the market, nor the elders gathered beneath the great baobab tree. She was a ghost of the past, a shadow that had returned to claim what was hers. Abony had spent years wandering foreign lands, learning the ways of merchants, warriors, and rulers. She had become more than just the frightened girl Jabari had sold. She was now a woman of power, with wealth beyond what he could ever imagine. And she had come back for justice. Abony moved through the streets, observing the changes in Neanda. The village that had once thrived under fairness and community was now a place of quiet suffering. The people walked with bowed heads, their laughter replaced by whispers of fear. Jabari had grown wealthier, but his cruelty had multiplied. He ruled the village with an iron fist, demanding high tributes and punishing those who dared defy him. Abony's fists clenched as she listened to the stories. "Did you hear?" a woman whispered to another near the market. Old Kofi refused to pay Jabari's new tax. They say his son was taken away in the night. "The man grows greedier every day," the other woman murmured. "And poor Mama Ifia, ever since her daughter was taken, she has lived like a ghost." Abony's heart clenched. Mama Ifia, her mother. Her mother had suffered. Because of him. She found her mother's hut near the outskirts of the village. The once proud home now stood in disrepair, its walls cracked, the garden overgrown with weeds. Abony hesitated, drawing a steady breath before stepping inside. Her mother sat near the dim fire, her once dark hair streaked with silver, her body frail. She stared into the flames, lost in thought, unaware of Abony's presence. "Mother," Abony whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The woman turned slowly, her eyes widening. "Who?" Abony removed her hood, allowing the firelight to illuminate her face. The silence stretched between them, the crackling of the fire the only sound in the small hut. Then, a sob broke through the quiet. "My child, my child." Mama Ifia fell into Abony's arms, clinging to her as though she feared she would vanish again. "I thought you were lost forever." Tears streamed down Abony's face as she held her mother. "I have returned, Mama. And I will make everything right." Her mother pulled back, searching her face with trembling hands. "You have changed, my daughter. There is strength in your eyes." Abony smiled, a quiet determination burning within her. "Yes, Mama. And Jabari will soon learn that he no longer holds power over us." Abony spent the next few days gathering more information. She learned of Jabari's greed, of his enemies, of the men who secretly resented him but feared his power. She did not rush. Revenge was best served cold. She had waited years to return. Now, it was time to strike. The night air in Neanda was thick with the scent of burning wood and the quiet murmurs of traders closing their stalls. Abony sat in the largest guest hut in the village square, dressed in fine silks, her face partially veiled like a foreign merchant of great wealth. She had come bearing riches, gifts, and promises, and Jabari had taken the bait like a starving jackal. Jabari sat before her, his greedy eyes gleaming as he sipped from a golden goblet, a gift from Abony herself. "So, you claim to have traveled across many lands, dealing in gold, spices, and rare fabrics?" he asked, trying to mask his eagerness. Abony gave a mysterious smile. "More than that. I have learned the secrets of wealth, power, and influence. But I do not waste my riches on those who do not understand them." Jabari leaned forward. "I am a man of vision. I built my fortune from nothing. Tell me, what do you seek?" Abony traced her fingers over the edge of her cup. "A powerful partner. Someone who can help me expand my influence into Neanda and beyond. Someone with resources." She paused, meeting his gaze. "You seem capable." The flattery worked. Jabari puffed out his chest. "Capable? I am the wealthiest man in this region." Abony tilted her head. "Wealthy, yes. But are you the most powerful?" The question planted the first seed of doubt in his mind. She could see it, the hunger in his eyes, the ambition he could never satisfy. She leaned forward. "I can make you greater than you ever imagined. But only if you prove yourself." Jabari was hooked. Over the next few weeks, Abony played her role perfectly. She lured Jabari into grand promises, investments in trade routes that didn't exist, business ventures in distant lands he had never heard of. She filled his ears with stories of greater riches, convincing him to pour his silver and gold into risky deals, always making him believe that he was on the verge of something monumental. Jabari, blinded by greed, did not realize that every document he signed, every decision he made, was slowly shifting control of his wealth to Abony. While Jabari dreamed of untold riches, Abony moved through the village like a shadow, whispering truths into the right ears. To the village elders, she spoke of Jabari's mismanagement, his reckless spending, his carelessness with the village's future. To his closest allies, she planted doubts, small, subtle hints that Jabari was no longer the powerful leader they once admired. "Have you noticed how he invests in things no one understands?" she murmured to one of Jabari's old friends. "He does not even consult his most trusted allies anymore," she whispered to another. Slowly, like a spider spinning a web, Abony made sure Jabari's foundation began to crack. One evening, as Jabari sat before a table stacked with documents and agreements, he laughed to himself. "Soon, I will be richer than even the chiefs of the great kingdoms." Abony, seated across from him, watched with quiet satisfaction. Then, she leaned back and said the words that would seal his fate. "Tell me, Jabari, do you even know who I am?" He frowned, confused. "You are a foreign merchant. A trader of great wealth." Abony smiled, a slow, knowing smile. She reached up and pulled away her veil. Jabari's face paled. Abony let the silence stretch between them before whispering, "You sold me for gold. And now, you have handed me everything you own." The blood drained from his face as he scrambled for the documents, his eyes scanning the pages. Then the truth struck him like a thunderclap. Abony had tricked him. His wealth, his power, he had signed it all away. And it was only the beginning. The morning sun rose over Neanda, casting long shadows over the village square, where the people had gathered in murmurs of confusion and curiosity. Something was about to happen, something big. Jabari stormed into the square, his face twisted in anger and panic. He had spent the night going through every document, every deal he had made with the mysterious foreign merchant, only to realize the horrifying truth. He had been deceived. Everything, his lands, his wealth, his influence, was gone. And the worst part? He didn't even know who had orchestrated his downfall. Until now. Abony stood at the center of the square, poised like a queen addressing her people. She was dressed in elegant robes, her head held high, her presence commanding. Jabari pushed through the crowd, his voice breaking with rage. You did this to me." Abony turned slowly, her gaze calm, almost pitying. Then, in front of the entire village, she spoke the words that sent a chill down Jabari's spine. "I did nothing more than return the favor, stepfather." Gasps echoed through the square. The villagers looked from Abony to Jabari, realization dawning in their eyes. The merchant who had entranced Jabari, who had stripped him of his wealth and power, was none other than the stepdaughter he had sold for gold. Jabari's breath came in short gasps as he stumbled back. No, this is impossible. Abeny stepped forward, her voice sharp and steady. You betrayed me. You sold me to a cruel man for your own greed, caring nothing for what would become of me. You left my mother to suffer under your rule. And now, you expect to escape justice? The murmurs in the crowd turned into shouts of anger. You sold your own stepdaughter? You brought shame upon Neanda. The gods have punished you for your greed, Jabari. Jabari turned, desperate, seeking allies. But there were none. The same men who had once stood by his side now stepped away, disgusted. The elders, whom he had once commanded, looked at him with cold disappointment. Then, an elder raised his staff. Jabari, you have dishonored this village. You have betrayed your own kin. You have lost everything by your own hand. No. Jabari shook his head wildly. I was tricked. She bewitched me. She outwitted you, the elder corrected. As you once outwitted her. Jabari's heart pounded as fear took hold. Please. I can make this right. The people weren't listening. Abeny stepped forward one last time, her voice strong enough to silence the crowd. I do not seek vengeance, she said. The gods have already dealt with him. I only ask that Neanda remember what happens to those who betray their own. The village elders exchanged glances before delivering the final decree. Jabari is no longer welcome in Neanda. The words struck like a death sentence. No. You cannot do this. Jabari pleaded, but the villagers had already turned their backs to him. For a man like him, exile was worse than death. A beggar's fate. Jabari, once the wealthiest and most feared man in Neanda, now wandered the land with nothing but rags on his back. The gold that had once filled his hands was gone. The power he had worshipped had abandoned him. No village would take him in. No ally remained by his side. And as he begged for food from strangers, he was forced to live with the truth. Abeny had taken back everything he stole. And she had done it without ever lifting a sword. Abeny stood at the edge of the village, staring at the home she had once been forced to leave in tears. Now, she returned not as a helpless girl, but as a woman of power and wisdom. The people of Neanda had already whispered her name in awe, their respect growing with each passing day. But there was only one person she truly longed to see. Her mother. As she stepped through the door of their old home, she found her mother sitting in the dim light, frail but alive. The years had weighed heavily on her, but when she looked up and saw Abeny standing before her, time seemed to fall away. Abeny, her mother's voice trembled, as if she didn't believe her own eyes. Tears filled Abeny's eyes as she knelt before the woman who had once held her in times of sorrow. Mother, I'm home. Her mother's sobs broke the silence, and she clutched Abeny as if afraid to let go. I thought I lost you forever. Abeny held her tightly, her voice filled with certainty. No one will take me away again. With Jabari gone, the village was left in chaos. He had ruled with greed, exploiting the people, and now they struggled under the weight of his past mistakes. Abeny wasted no time. She used the wealth she had accumulated from her travels to rebuild what Jabari had ruined. Farmlands that had once been abandoned were restored, and the villagers no longer lived in fear of losing their homes. But Abeny did more than just restore Neanda, she changed it. She made sure that no girl would ever suffer as she had. She gathered the elders, speaking with a strength that could not be ignored. No girl in Neanda will be sold for wealth again, she declared. We will not trade daughters like cattle. We will protect them. The village elders, shamed by their silence in the past, agreed. A new law was put in place, ensuring that no father, no stepfather, no desperate man could ever sell his child again. Word of Abeny's victory spread beyond Neanda. People from distant villages came to see the woman who had outwitted a cruel ruler and turned her suffering into strength. But Abeny knew her mission was not over. She had been one girl stolen from her home, but there were others, girls still trapped in foreign lands, suffering the same fate she had barely escaped. And she would not abandon them. Using her resources and connections, she arranged secret rescues, freeing young women from forced marriages and slavery. She gave them shelter, protection, and the chance to rebuild their lives, just as she had rebuilt her own. Years passed, and Abony's name became more than just a memory, it became a legend. Mothers told their daughters about the girl who had been betrayed but had returned stronger. Elders spoke of her wisdom and courage. Travelers carried her story to distant lands, where young girls whispered her name as a symbol of hope. And in Neanda, under the rule of the woman who had once been its outcast, no girl was ever sold again. Abony had not just taken back what was stolen from her. She had given countless others the chance to take back their own lives.